Hello and welcome to our webinar, Invisible Speakers with Amina Loudspeakers. I'm your host, Fatih Öztürk. And before I introduce our co-host and before we start the presentation, I just want to mention, feel free to ask questions in the checkbox. We try to answer it after the presentation. Feel free to ask it in German. I try to translate it in English and try to ask the correct way to John. And enough talk from me. I want to give the word to our co-host, John Catani. John, it's your turn.
Brilliant. Thank you very much. I'm going to switch my webcam off so we can start this presentation. And thanks very much, Fatih. So good morning to you. My name is John Catani and I form part of the technical sales team here at Amina. I'm delighted to be presenting this short webinar for you today, and hopefully in doing so, we'll be able to provide you with a greater awareness of the technology and how it can be used in many different client applications. My colleague Adrian Biggs from our technical Amina support team is also on the panel with me today, and we'll be happy to answer any questions at the end of the presentation. Okay, so over the next 20 minutes or so, I'd like to briefly introduce you to the technology behind our invisible speakers, provide a brief overview of our products, give inspiration for possible applications, and details for the different ways the Amina team can support and add value when planning your projects. So let's go. Not many people know that Amina have been at the forefront of DML loudspeaker innovation for more than 2 decades. Established back in 1999 and going on to create one of the first commercially available invisible loudspeaker products, Amina have developed and patented many technologies over that time, building them into products that have later gone on to win awards. One of the main contributors to this success is the continued focus on research and development. It's what keeps Amina one step ahead of the competition. With headquarters in Huntingdon, Cambridgeshire, the UK Silicon Valley of the hi-fi world, and with offices across the world, the Amina family consists of a friendly and knowledgeable, dedicated team of industry professionals, all focused on providing the very best customer service and invisible audio experience. Now, the very first plaster over speaker in the world was developed by Amina and was actually for the Reunification Bank in Germany. The bank had approached us asking if a speaker could be completely hidden. At the time, picture frame speakers were as close as you could get to discrete audio. Our MD thought that if you could tune an instrument, such as an acoustic guitar, then there must be a way of tuning a DML speaker to accept a covering material. He went back to the bank with his prototype and he said, if it works, you can buy it. If it doesn't work, then no charge, as it's installed in a freshly plastered and decorated wall, so leave it there. Thankfully for Amina, it did work, and I'm happy to report that it's been working in their boardroom ever since, some 21 years later. Now, I mentioned in that story DML, and Amina speakers utilize distributed mode loudspeaker technology in our invisible speakers. We call it DML for short. It works by creating tiny micro vibrations across the entire surface of a resonant soundboard, much like an acoustic guitar. And because we're using micro vibrations and not moving pistonic cones, as found in regular speakers, we're able to create incredibly slim speakers that can be tuned to accept a covering material and still provide incredible room-filling sound. Most people who are new to DML technology will assume that covering the surface of an invisible speaker with something like 2 millimeters of plaster will cause the sound clarity and performance to reduce dramatically. However, the Mobius family are actually pre-tuned by model to accept the weight of 2 millimeter skin plaster. And if you play a Mobius speaker in free air without the weighted covering, counterintuitively, they sound worse. They sound quite bright and tinny. The use of DML speaker technology also provides other less talked about benefits over that of its regular counterpart. Here we have a simple animation that shows visually and audibly what makes a DML speaker different to conventional speakers that we're all used to. This example compares in-ceiling speakers, but the basic principle is the same, whether freestanding or installed. So, as we've seen, DML loudspeakers provide room-filling sound and are significantly less directional than normal speakers. Now let's look in more detail at how DML speakers work and what other benefit the technology offers. Following on from the video we just watched, this diagram illustrates what might be happening at higher frequencies if we could see the sound output. And it also gives us an example of the dispersion in an everyday room situation. You can see as red gets more intense, the spread of sound at those frequencies narrow. You need to be on axis to clearly hear those frequencies, and there will always be some effect from room reflections and furniture interaction, but in this example we're simplifying. DML loudspeaker, by comparison, located in the same position, radiates in an almost identical fashion regardless of frequency. Every part of the room experiences the equivalent of on-axis listening, providing much better clarity throughout the entire space and enabling the freedom to position the speakers in more locations. Another benefit of using DML technology is much less sound level fall off over distance in a bounded space. Perfect for those large coverage applications. This ultimately allows us to reduce speaker quantities being specified and keeps us a competitive option. Take this pool area as an example. Here, typically 2 DML loudspeakers replace 6 conventional speakers whilst maintaining or even improving on the even loudness structure across the space. The result is not louder, but a more even, higher clarity sound coverage. Previous Amina success stories include public spaces in hotels, swimming pools, high-end retail outlets, including F&M in Germany, and Michelin-starred restaurants, to name a few. DML speakers do not need to be invisible, but invisibility is the benefit that everyone remembers. And this is why I've mentioned it last. With the help of modern composite materials, we can now produce products that are very slim, very light, and which can be disguised as something else entirely. And this allows architects and interior designers the freedom to create the look they want, unencumbered by the presence of speakers. Additionally, DML speakers are not so critical on placement, allowing more flexibility for other existing items such as lights to be placed in the most aesthetically pleasing position possible. In keeping with the architect's or designer's original idea and overall vision for the design. Okay, so let's have a look at some of the speakers in a bit more detail. Amina invisible speakers are available in 2 main product families and all occupy little depth. Only 4 centimeters is required when mounting without a backbox. And both models have primarily been designed to replace a section of 12mm thick plasterboard. And for all other depths of plasterboard, shims can be ordered to help align those speakers correctly. Edge models, seen here in red on the left, provide a warm sound and are designed principally for use in dryline construction applications, with edge speakers having a tapered border similar to the tapered edge found on plasterboard. Allowing tape and jointing around its perimeter, edge models can also accept a 0.5mm fine finish plaster coat over their entire surface and have a greater efficiency, i.e. loudness, for the same power in. Mobius models, on the other hand, seen here in blue on the right, provide a crisp clarity and are designed to sound their best when covered with a 1.5 to 2mm skim coat of plaster, and are ideally suited to fully plastered environments. They're specifically pre-tuned to accept this weighted material. Now, speaker selection is typically weighted on construction type, then expected finish, and then intended application. There can be situations that favour one range over another for a project, so it's important to consider all of these factors when selecting the appropriate product. Both Edge and Mobius are available in multiple sizes and performance options, and can be further enhanced by the addition of a subwoofer for certain applications. The 3 eyes are 300mm wide and typically used in commercial applications such as MDUs or lesser rooms in any home. They offer cost-effective performance levels and are suitable for ambient everyday listening, whereas the 5-eye and 7-eye models are 345 wide and suitable for applications in all spaces, generating high-quality sound at higher sound pressure levels. The 7 eyes are especially suitable for when loud party music or loud cinema reproduction is required. And for older listed buildings where joist spacing is quite tight, we also offer a 200mm variant of our Mobius 5-eye model. Now, this chart illustrates in broad terms the suitability of different speakers depending on the application. Amina are always happy to give advice on product combinations that would be suitable for any given application or project. In general terms, any of the speakers shown here can provide ambient background music. But for continuous loud music applications, we would recommend adding bass enhancement, particularly for those dance music kind of situations where tracks tend to have a heavy bass component. With the exception of the Edge 7i that have sufficient bass without the use of an additional subwoofer. And in situations where bass needs to be felt as well as heard, such as with a 5.1 system or Dolby 7.4.2 surround sound system, then as you would with conventional speakers, a powerful subwoofer is required to really get a thump or rumble. All of that adding to the experience and enabling you to enjoy those action films to their fullest. Now let's have a look at some of the supporting products that come along with the Amina speakers. And on the last slide, we mentioned subwoofers. Believe it or not, Amina has a range of discrete options here too, with subwoofers that can be integrated into walls or furniture, leaving only a small port grille visible, that can also be color matched to its surroundings, rendering it virtually invisible. The perfect accompaniment for any Amina speaker being used in a loud music or multi-channel application. Backboxes are available for our speaker models for both solid wall and cavity wall installations, helping to reduce rearward sound transmission, protect the rear of the speaker, and maintain a consistent cavity performance between speakers in the same space. Our speakers can also be built with integrated multi-tap transformers, enabling them to be used in commercial projects that utilize 70 volt or 100 volt line high impedance systems. These high impedance systems are typically used to distribute audio over large areas with long cable runs, in most cases with many speakers being driven from a single cable. The transformers that we attach also form part of the speaker's protection requirement. Now, due to their integrated nature, Amina speakers will need protecting. With low impedance systems, this can be achieved by using our single inline APU or an 8-channel or 16-channel rack-mounted option. Some amplifiers also provide an option to do this digitally for even greater protection against accidental overdriving. The use of protection devices is one of the requirements needed to activate our Amina extended warranty. And in both residential and commercial applications, providing the requirements are met, we can provide a 10-year limited warranty on the product itself against manufacturing defects. Of course, full terms and conditions are available from our website and go into this in a bit more detail. Fire hoods are another accessory that can be ordered as required. They're made by Hoodie, another UK company, and for use where you need to maintain a 60-minute fire barrier as part of a cavity backbox installation. Additional installation accessories such as full-width scrim tape for Mobius installs, along with mounting blocks and alignment shims, are also available to aid a smooth installation. We mentioned earlier that the Mobius family can also be covered by many other materials, such as wood, wood veneer, leather, and many more, creating fantastic freedom for the interior designer. And people are often surprised to learn the range of materials that can be used. It's important to note that the more compliant a material, the softer the material, the more high frequencies will be affected, and the heavier the material, i.e. the more mass to the material, the more the bass performance will be affected. And this can usually be corrected or compensated to a certain degree by the use of DSP. Amina will also provide the ability to test sample material, and this is providing you can source a sample big enough to house or to cover an entire speaker. On the left here, we have a London showroom where Mobius speakers were integrated behind a slate wall to form part of a TV surround sound system. There is an application guide available on our website with more detail, but essentially the way they managed to achieve this installation was to install the speaker behind a 2mm thick veneer supported by a backing board. Okay, so today's session was to provide an overview of the Amina speakers. However, we appreciate some of you may have never seen them installed before. And as an important part of explaining the solution and how it works, we felt it would be beneficial to provide a brief overview of a typical install. So most importantly, cutting a small inspection hole to work out where your joists are. Use the accompanied template to draw around the right size hole, and then remove that section of plasterboard. Your back box will go in, slightly bigger than the hole that you've cut. Mounting screws top and bottom. Connect your cable using a solid crimp connection, feed any excess back up into the cavity, screw the speaker in, and then continue with filling around the perimeter of the speaker. You really want to work that in there as well, because that's one of the first bonding stages. Allow that to dry, sand smooth where required, and then apply full width scrim tape to the front surface of the speaker. Then you're ready for your final plaster, and you can decorate as required. And now here's the edge installation into dryline for comparison. A lot of the steps are the same to begin with, so we join the process at a later stage where it starts to differ. Much like before the speaker goes in, you fill the perimeter with joint filler, really working it in. And this is where it starts to differ. Once that's dried and you've sanded it smooth, you then apply scrim tape around the perimeter of the speaker, and then using jointing compound, fill that perimeter as well. In most cases, this is enough, but there is an extra step that you can take if you're at all worried about texture matching. That extra step is to apply a fine surface filler, no more than 0.5mm in thickness, to the front surface and then feather in. Once all dried, you can then paint and decorate as required. So as you can see, the installation is not complex, but it's important that it's done correctly and to the process for the optimum client experience. We've shown here the most common types of installation, but these install examples are equally applicable to in-wall or in-ceiling installations. More in-depth information on installation is available from our website, aminasound.com. And now let's take a look at some previous Amina success stories. So here's an example of a historic commercial application. Some of you may recognize this as the Nymphenburg Castle in Germany. Amina was recommended for this project due to it being a listed property, and with very strict German planning laws, due to the age of the castle, meant that there were only really two options available: invisible or no speakers at all. Thankfully, Amina was able to get approved for use, primarily because we would not detract from the look or feel of the interior. As part of the multi-use function room, which also doubles up as a ballroom, designers placed plaster-in speakers underneath every other light fitting. People that were using the space for functions were able to hear the sound all throughout the space with no idea where it was coming from. Staying in Germany for a moment here, here's an example of a modern commercial application in the form of this dental practice. They preferred to use our speakers as the solution here, not because they were invisible, but because they were able to install them into a surface that could be deep cleaned. Medical applications are often overlooked, but especially in current times, being able to deep clean an area is becoming more and more important. For example, if Mobius products are fitted behind a melamine or other wipeable surface, such as waterproof paint, then these can be deep cleaned with ease, and there are no grills that germs can get stuck in. Another commercial space where Amina have had success is this wellness spa pool just south of the Yorkshire Dales here in England. Speakers were used in ceiling behind plaster and not only provided greater clarity of sound for the space, but were also protected from the humidity of the poolside environment once they were fully installed. This kind of example is equally applicable to other acoustically harsh spaces, such as boardrooms, retail spaces, restaurants, and even art galleries. Looking at residential now, and this shows a grade-listed historic residential property in the heart of London's Mayfair district. The UK conservation planning laws meant that the original look and feel of the property had to remain intact, and this is where our speakers were right at home. Invisible sound is the perfect solution for historic homes wanting to combine the authentic look and feel along with the latest AV entertainment systems. Here we can also see that they've clearly used a mirror frame TV to hide the TV when it's not in use. It's quite clever, really. Staying in London and looking at a more modern residential property now, for this project, speakers were installed into the coffers, the drop sections of the ceiling, to provide multi-room audio throughout the entire property. Invisible speakers provided the best solution here as well, allowing a greater amount of freedom to the interior designer. Also, I think it's important to note that spaces such as this one can also be incredibly acoustically harsh, down to having hard floors, something that conventional speakers may struggle with. Amina speakers can also be used in high-performance surround sound applications, such as in a multi-use cinema room or small-scale cinema application. We find this to be one of the most impressive uses of invisible speakers. No wonder it's a preferred configuration choice for our partner showrooms. Here to discuss an example of this is our UK distribution partner, Redline.
Redline started distributing Amina in 2008, and in the last 12 years, we've learned an awful lot about design, specification, and installation. We have 3 demo facilities at Redline. Our main media room downstairs displays Amina Immersive at its best. It's 7.2.4 using Edge 7, Edge 5, and Velodyne in wall subs. The reaction we've had from everybody who's come to listen to that system has been excellent. I think people are very, very surprised at just how good a value for money, a high performance system that really is. And every single end user that's been through there has absolutely loved it. Our newly finished small demonstration room was conceived to show the difference between Amina in-wall and in-ceiling speakers. These systems are driven identically by the same AV amp and the same source, and you can actually swap between the systems on the fly. The speakers we're using in that room are Edge 3 in the wall and Edge 3 in the ceiling. So the only difference between both systems will be their position in the room. Typical result of the sound quality in that room is very Amina. It's a big sound, easy to listen to and very impressive.
Having good demonstration facilities really helps, and I would encourage anyone looking to add Amina to their showroom to contact Fatih after the webinar for details on what's available to support this. Clients will rarely ask for invisible in initial conversation, in large part because they're unaware such a technology exists. Not helped by the possibility that clients most likely have never seen an invisible speaker, let alone given the opportunity to hear one in action. Because of how unique the solution is, it's unwise to assume that datasheets will provide your clients with a full indication of performance and value. Also, datasheets can never truly describe how something sounds. By its very nature, sound is subjective, and what you personally might prefer from an audio experience, your client may not, and vice versa. This is where Amina Experience Centers really do come into their own, as very quickly clients can get a real sense of how the solution performs, whilst removing any doubts or preconceptions they might have about the performance of this different type of technology. Demos can be provided in a number of different ways, depending on what's most convenient for your client, from small portable freestanding speakers that can be taken on site to fully installed music showrooms or completely immersive surround sound systems, such as those found in our Amina Experience Centers. Amina are always happy to arrange demonstrations, as experiencing the speakers in person is really the only way to fully appreciate the quality and immersive sound achievable when using DML speakers. So as mentioned earlier, for those new to Amina, often the biggest mistake when specifying Amina speakers for their projects is that too many speakers are specified, as the wide dispersion characteristic of our speakers is often overlooked. Because of this overspecification, it could appear that invisible speakers as an option is too expensive, when in reality, on a system level, it may have been a more competitive option. Amina decided that more support was needed. And at the beginning of 2021, we launched the Amina Specification Service, specifically designed for those new to Amina, but increasingly used by some of our long-standing customers as a great way to save time. Since its launch, we've found, to our surprise, that even consultants have been enthusiastic to use it, as having a manufacturer recommended layout provided them with the confidence to put forward different solutions. We can only make recommendations based on the information provided, but it's a great tool for a non-expensive solution. It's especially important to look at the system level costs in a 100-volt line application, as due to the wide spacing and reduced numbers required, the labour and amplification costs are significantly less. We're happy to support you, and by association, any consultants that you're working with when it comes to considering the use of invisible speakers. So do get in touch if you need any support. As well as our specification service, the Amina Learning Portal was also launched this year with the purpose to make it even easier to learn about and get familiarized with invisible speaker technology. We provide several free courses, from specifying guidance to installation training, and even a REBA-accredited CPD course designed specifically for architects and interior designers. Some of our UK integrators have even used the portal as a great training resource when bringing on new team members. I would also recommend taking a look after the webinar and sharing with your teams where appropriate to help bring them up to speed. Any feedback on this portal is also welcomed, as we're continually looking at ways of making improvements. Hopefully this short presentation has provided you with useful information. And as an introduction to the technology, to get started using and recommending Amina products, by now you should be able to confidently recommend more benefits than just being invisible, and hopefully confidently explain to clients the key advantages of using DML technology in their projects. If you need any further support or guidance, please do get in contact with us. Details on screen now, along with useful web links to some of the tools we mentioned earlier in the presentation. Thank you very much for watching, and we'll now move to questions.
So let me check. I have a couple of questions come in here. I try to translate it because it's in German. 1 second. It's one is the Backbox necessary for the installation?
Okay, yeah, good question. So the Backbox is not necessary in terms of absolutely necessary. You can install the speaker without a Backbox. However, it's important to understand what the Backbox does when you're using it as part of the installation, as it provides quite a few different benefits to having a Backbox in that situation. I think the biggest benefit that I can think of is the fact that it aids protection against the back of the speaker. It also provides rearward sound reduction in the mid frequencies by about 27 dB, but also it gives you the same consistent cavity behind the speaker as well to provide you with the consistent performance across different speakers installed in different spaces.
Okay, next one is, do you need anything else besides the speakers to install it? Is there anything else necessary for the installation?
Okay. So in terms of, I mean, it would probably be all your standard kind of equipment that you'd normally find on a building site, in terms of something to cut out a section of plasterboard with, and your kind of finishing tools in terms of different trowels and kind of spatulas to be able to put into. There are a couple of different things that it would definitely be beneficial to have with you when you're doing it. I would namely say a portable amplifier, so you could actually perform sweep testing and tone testing of the speakers before you actually plaster them in.
I guess the question is with the APU, because, you know, I guess our customer saw the APU. I mean, you need an APU for the installation, so it's not just plug into the amplifier and it's good. You need the protection device. Next question is, here, it's also regarding the APU. Where to install the APU, near the amplifier or near the speaker? Like,
that's a fantastic question, and the reason why we've kept things kind of modular with separate APUs is so you can install the APU by the amplifier or in the rack location. That is probably the best place to install the APU. That's what we'd recommend as well, because for any reason, if you need to get to that device to service it, then it is in an accessible location. Essentially, if you put it in behind the speaker as part of the first main installation, then you can't access it once it's installed. So definitely by the amplifier in the rack location there.
okay, great. Next one is amplifier power suggestion. Like, how much power do you need for amplification? Like, I don't know, 50 watts, 100 watt. What's the go-to from Amina?
I mean, in terms of amplifier power requirements, we've actually got the information available on the data sheets per different model of speaker, because they all have slightly different power ratings. We don't tend to make specific recommendations on kind of brands of amplifier, but I would always make sure and check with the data sheets that the amplifier you are selecting has sufficient power and sufficient headroom to be able to accommodate the speakers it's driving.
Perfect. Next one is about the warranty. How long is the warranty for the speakers? Like, I guess you mentioned it already in the presentation, but yeah, I'm not sure if the customer asked it before or after. I don't see that unfortunately.
Yeah, absolutely. Adrian, do you want to jump in on that one?
Yeah, sure. That's a straightforward one. 10 years on the loudspeakers. On the subwoofers, I believe it's 3 years. Yeah.
Perfect. So I got another one. Hold on, I have to translate it first. It's a little bit tough for me to translate it. It's can you install it in a ceiling canopy, I guess, with fabric? Like,
Yeah, for sure. There's a few ways of doing that. In fact, either range of speakers, the Mobius or the Edge, can be covered with fabric. They'll have slightly requirements depending on the installation. With the Mobius speakers, the fabric would essentially need to be adhered to the face of the speaker panel. And for the Edge speakers, we would be looking to use an acoustically transparent fabric without it contacting the face of the speaker.
okay, so hold on, I have another one here. It's like, how are the speakers performing in a 5.1 system? Left and right channels, question mark. Like, I guess he's asking, like, you know, because of the technology, you can spot the left channel and the right channel. How will this perform in a 5.1 system?
I think, well, all of the examples of media room systems I've seen and heard, it works very, very well indeed. You still get great localization of the sounds, good channel separation. Where it does really make a difference is you actually get quite a consistent experience across all of the different listening positions in the room. So you may have seen some media room speakers that have aimable tweeters, the conventional type cone speakers. And that's because what John touched on earlier, the high frequencies tend to have a very narrow dispersion pattern. So you use these aimable tweeters to point at the listening position, but that does tend to mean that there's one best seat in the house. And that's not so much the case with Amina speakers. You get all of the seats in the house, get a very consistent and very good audio experience.
So I guess this is it. Hold on, let me scroll to the questions if I overlooked. One is like, can I use the speakers in a humid environment, like where some humidity, like in yachts, etc.? I guess the customer, it's asking specific for in yachts, you know, where you have a rough environment where everything is wet and humidity is a part of the problem. Do you see any problems to install it there?
Humidity is not a problem generally, as long as speakers are sealed away from the room, as they are in most cases. I would probably recommend Mobius speakers because they get fully covered in those applications. The only area really where that might be an issue is perhaps a sauna or something along those lines, where the heat might become an issue. But we have actually installed into saunas as well before, where we've been able to work out that the cavity above the sauna space where the speakers live doesn't exceed the operating limits of the speaker's temperature range.
Okay, perfect. Let me scroll to it again. I guess we are through the questions. If somebody wants to ask another question, feel free to jump in. Otherwise, I guess we have all the questions. I see a couple of questions regarding pricing, etc., but I will come back to you directly regarding the prices and showrooms, etc. I mean, yep. All the questions that I got pricing wise, I will contact you guys and ladies after the webinar, so we can go through the prices, etc. So that's it. I don't see any further questions. I mean, thank you for the great presentation, John and Adrian. And
yeah, thank you for having us.
Everybody to joining us, and hopefully see everybody in the next webinar meeting whatsoever. Thank you. That's it, everybody. Have a great day.